Welcome to CitySpace. CitySpace is a virtual 3D world that lives entirely on the web and looks very real. What you're seeing here is a 3D model created for CitySpace. And again, when visitors come to CitySpace, they're going to do it through a web browser or a phone. There's no plugin to download, and any device can access it. All the rendering is done server side. You can see here one of the downtown sections of CitySpace. There is really no limit to the size of the world that we can have here. Every single building has an interior, has a room behind every window. So right now you're looking at the downtown section of the world, and we're just flying around, essentially touring this environment. But it's richly detailed. Every fire escape, trash on the ground, it's all there and modeled. And if it happens to be an interior space that is owned by a user, then that user can modify the world or his space, his or her space, any way that they want. And we don't limit ourselves to buildings that are made up. We actually have some real buildings, like the Chrysler building you see here, where every brick and pillar and window and floor is modeled in great detail. And you can see here you can tag the sides of buildings, their abilities to paint and modify the world. But it is persistent, so the changes that are made to the world are stored permanently for people to see later on. Now, these outdoor spaces also include billboards and other forms of sponsored advertising. And again, they're just seamlessly integrated into the greater detail that is presented in these big open spaces. Now, the flip side of that is that users can actually put up their own. Here we have a billboard right there. It could be anything. But users within their own rooms can actually put up any texture or painting that they want. It's an open world in that sense, and there's a content filtering system. And you can see here just the size of just one area of downtown city, just from an aerial view. There's really no limit even to how many simultaneous buildings we can render. So you can see here we're transitioning from an aerial view to actually flying between the buildings again, and the speed is pretty good. The technology behind this rendering engine is Otoy. Now we are also here rendering the another real life scene, the downtown standard. For those of you who live in Los Angeles, you might recognize this this restaurant, complete with pool. As you can see here, we've got ray tracing, so we can have perfect reflections. We have global illumination in real time, and all this is really so that we can present a more realistic world. The goal of CitySpace is for you to live in a world that looks and feels real, and that has few, if any, barriers of entry in terms of being able to access and use it. So again, our big goal focus with this technology is to enable you to access it through a web page and with no plugins and no download. So the second you're connected to CitySpace, you're here. Here we are going down the Pacific Coast Highway, and another actual area from the real world that we've built, and includes the Santa Monica Pier as well, as you can see here. So we're not just dealing with creating buildings and city areas, we also have created beaches and highways. And you can see here we've got cars as well that you can own, just like you do with building or an avatar. And changing the lighting and the time of day makes a big difference in terms of how an object looks. Now here we're looking at an interior space called the Palace. These are the avatars for the first Phase 1 launch of CitySpace. They're 120,000 polygons each. You can change their pose, change the color of their clothing, change their clothing completely, and of course hair color, all those other things. We give you complete control over that part of of your character. And characters can be male or female. They also, of course, live in apartments and homes. And this is one of them. Now, this is a space, unlike the outside, where every single surface you're seeing here could be controlled by the users. You can change the color of the walls. You can change the position of furniture. Every poster that you're seeing here, every magazine that's left on the floor is all stuff that a user who owns this room can modify. And we have a lot of space in CitySpace, so there's really no limit on the number of rooms and the number of users we can host. But even short of changing textures, just changing, turning on a light or changing where a light is positioned can actually drastically alter how the scene looks. As you can see here, just by moving the position of a light, the rendering looks quite different, and the shadows can be very dramatic. So the engine handles full real-time lighting up to 16 light sources in a closed environment, plus infinite bounce lighting, which is necessary for global illumination. And you can see here just details of user-generated objects. This magazine cover could be one that you choose. and the monitors can actually host real computers that can access the internet. We'll show you more examples of that later. Now, this is a public space. This is a bar environment. Again, in a public space, there's less control over how the surfaces are rendered. But in the case of an office space, such as this one, it is like a home or apartment. You can change pretty much anything in here. All this furniture and all these lights are positioned by the user. And so you can have a virtual office in CitySpace. You can have a virtual home or virtual party. All these things are possible. And there's many different types of environments. We have a working subway system. So this is the interior of one of the subway cars, again shown with different kinds of lighting and illumination. And there are, of course, subway trains and stations. And this is the palace. Again, you can see here the detail in the environments are pretty high. Every candle, every curtain ring is rendered. Every drake can be lit from behind, and it makes a big difference in terms of preserving sort of the sense of realism that we're striving for in CitySpace. The kinds of clothing and threads that you can clothe your avatar with are also fairly limitless, and users can actually upload decals as well. Here's another section of the world. This is the suburbs. Again, like the downtown section that was shown earlier, this section is essentially unlimited in size. We can really host tens of thousands of blocks. There's about 20 different kinds of suburban homes that we're launching with, which can then be changed by the end user. Everything from the color of the painting on the walls to the tiles on the roof to the position of furniture and carpeting. All these things are controlled by end users, so it really does become their personalized home. And you can see here that it's pretty interesting. We can go inside any one of these buildings. Here's the garage of one of these houses where we can put our cars, which are another customizable object in CitySpace. These are interior spaces. Again, every house is a little bit different. Some come with pools, some don't, and we also have spaces that are between urban and suburban areas. But you can change and modify the look and feel of your home in really an infinite number of ways, just with lighting and texturing and the built-in sort of surfaces and materials that we have, whether it's carpeting or stones or grass. There's many ways to landscape and control how a particular home looks and feels. The streets themselves are actually pretty detailed. So I think really what we're demonstrating here is that you can go close to pretty much any part of CitySpace, and it holds up pretty well. It's designed, again, to sort of fool the eye and fool the mind into thinking, well, you're living in a fairly realistic area. Now this is, again, we have day and night cycles in CitySpace. So now you're looking at the same suburban areas we were showing you earlier, but now at nighttime. And the rendering engine is able to really handle everything live. So there's no built-in light maps. Every time that a firecracker goes off or there's a fireplace somewhere, all the lighting changes in the world. So there's really no problem handling day or night scenes with equal plumb. Now we're about to see another area of CitySpace. This is more of an urban area, but not quite the same scale as the downtown section we showed earlier. Again, we really strive for making the areas look very real and yet interesting to live in. So this is a little bit sort of a yellow glowish sunset lighting. This is the same area with a little bit more, I guess, rendered at noon when the sun is sort of not quite sunsetting. And again, everything from the flaking of paint to the hubs on cars, they're all there. Everything is rendered in pretty high detail, and there really is no limits to where and how the camera can go. We're really, again, just touring these spaces. When you're actually in CitySpace and using it practically over the web, you get a 2D map of the entire world, the entire city, and you can position where you want to go, and your character is brought along with you to that place. And certain areas are private, which is when, if you own a room, you can invite who you want there. And other areas, like what we're showing here, are public spaces that anybody can go to and visit without any limits. We can have hundreds of characters or cars, even in one specific area. This is the same area at night we're showing here. Again, we have hundreds of different types of cars, which you can color and change and modify as you wish. We also have weather cycles, so it can rain, and again, the lighting and the surfaces are modified accordingly. Now we're going to look at another section of downtown, this one with a little bit more detail. We can see here the windows have full ray traced reflections. The idea is, again, that we just present something that looks as real as possible. And whether you're flying through the city, like we are here, or walking through it, or just on the surface and looking at a bunch of garbage bags. The idea is that it looks and feels real, and it's the core city space is that really every single window is a portal into a room or another world. It's limitless in that sense. So here we are going inside of an office environment from the outside, and that office environment is there's a lot of space obviously we're starting with, but it can be owned and put aside for a specific user to do what they want with. So in this particular case, the users can adjust their office, hold meetings there, and change how it looks. Now, we're looking at this city now at nighttime, and again, it can be very dramatic. Just changing this scene from day to night alters drastically how it looks. You have the indoor illumination actually shining through the windows. We've got a dozen floors in this building. Each one of them we're shining through these transparent window surfaces. Now, in a moment, we're actually going to switch back to night, and we're going to go inside of this floor, and you can see the interior space of this office has a little bit more detail than the one I was showing earlier. This one, there are actually coffee mugs on the desk over there and coffee makers, and you'll also notice that there is a painting on the far wall, which is just something that we can change and alter. If this happens to be our office space, we can put anything we want there. And it doesn't just have to be a picture. I mean, here I am. I'm loading in a folder from my desktop, and it's being rendered live in CitySpace. So everybody in this room that's connected through the internet or the world can see my folder on this picture frame, and I can select a different picture just right within the CitySpace application. And there really is no limit to the types of objects that we can sort of render on surfaces. So it can be a folder from your desktop, it could be an application, it can be a video or a web page, and this doesn't have to necessarily just be on a painting. This can be on your t-shirt or on a lampshade, and it can color the room. Now here I've loaded Microsoft Paint on this window. The executable, again, can be hosted locally. If I have the Otoy plugin, which is optional, I can take my own applications and put them on surfaces, or I can download an application or upload an application server side, and everybody then, even over the web, can interact with it without actually having that application installed. So here I am using Paint within CitySpace to actually write a message on this painting. And everybody that's in this world can share and use that application as well if I allow them, if I happen to be the owner of the room. So that is persistent. It stays there forever until I decide to change it. And there's a lot of powerful applications for sharing not just images. Here we have video pulled in from live video, but we can actually share Word documents. Any sort of document that you can imagine using on your Windows desktop or your Mac can actually be hosted and run inside of CitySpace. So there are a lot of interesting applications, even just in that small area of the feature set. Certainly, just by pulling in a video from live video, you can essentially turn every room into a sort of a small theater where everybody that's in that room can see what you're looking at, and having it embedded in the 3D space is interesting because you, of course, have the lighting and everything else as part of the rendering engine still working at the same time as the video is playing. Now what we're going to show here is yet another area. This is the mall. Now, we have user-generated content that can be traded and sold. We're also giving users the ability, just like they have with their office spaces in their apartments, to actually have stores and to sell and trade any object that they want. So any object can be quickly placed on a shelf. These are all just template stores. And you can put any kind of banners or advertising that you want on your storefront. So it's, again, one more area that we're enabling for users to interact and trade with. So instead of just having a simple 2D web page system, we have a storefront. Here we are, again, showing that the paintings are persistent. And that's all. Thank you for visiting CitySpace, and we hope to see you here very soon.